It's like asking about the purpose of why the author included something.
Purpose. Yeah, why? How do we know its purpose?
So it's
Yeah, sometimes it says reason, right? The reason helps.
Maybe serves too.
Serves, right? Serves is another one. Or to, right? In order to. Literally, the word to could also mean purpose. So what do you got to do on these ones, right? You do not want to answer directly, right? Answering directly is going to likely get you the wrong answer, right? You want to look at where it falls in the essay, right? If it falls in the beginning, what is its purpose? Introduce a claim, right? If it's the second sentence of a paragraph, what is it probably doing? Evidence that does what? What does evidence do? Support the claim, right? So if it's a second sentence and it's a specific detail, right? It's there to support the claim. If it's a third or fourth sentence towards the latter half of a paragraph, what is it there to do? Not yet. We're not concluding yet. It's the third or fourth latter half. Explaining, right? Explaining the significance, right? You introduce your claim, you support the claim with evidence, maybe you explain how the claim ties into your argument, right? And then you conclude or you transition, right? So its position in the paragraph is going to have a huge effect on what you're going to answer. So generally speaking, we could answer a question like 18 without even reading. Right? It says the main reason the author includes information about specifics. Which one is usually the best answer? D, right? You typically offer examples that support your evidence. You're probably not going to be A, right? You're typically not giving examples that don't support your answer. It could be true. And then maybe for something like 12, what would be like he'd hope to settle through his experiment? I don't know. Like you don't really settle things with science experiments. Maybe C would work, right? Maybe D. Okay, and then 25 we can't answer without the passage. But just remember that these types of questions, you're going to get it wrong if you answer directly from what it's saying. We did a whole thing about this before. So what we have infer, we have suggests, we have most likely, right? So what are these? Inference, right? So again, inference, do not answer word for word. Typically, if you answer word for word, you're probably going to get wrong. Typically, I've still seen it. Sometimes word for word, though, what do they do with word for word? They'll say not. They'll copy the phrase and say not or hardly. What you should do, answer very generally, right? Because when you infer, you don't want to infer very extremely. So what are some words we like in the answers? Maybe approximately is a good word, right? As opposed to exactly, right? Approximately is much better than exactly. Then words like significantly, that's when you need to be a little bit more suspicious, right? It could be true. Ooh, I see a bad word in 49. Does anybody see a bad word in 49 here in any of the answers? Specifically for science and stats. That's a bad word there. Stopping is okay. Stopping you can measure, right? You can literally measure, oh, it's going, it's stopping. Causing is that one word that's really weird in science, right? Do you really know that it's causing? Remember, the word that we prefer is correlates with, right? Something correlates with. is much more general of phrasing than causing. And for 3, right, he disliked any unnecessary use. That's like very broad, right? So be careful of those really strong answers. You should not answer what extremely. Also. That's your inference idea. Questions so far? Okay, question type number 5. Notice that in all the answers, right, we have passage 2, passage 1, both passages, right? So this is compare contrast, or both passages, however you want to call it, right? So again, this is going to follow the theme. This is going to be the theme for 80% of reading questions. Answer broadly. You do not know who these people are. Some of these people might even be dead, right? So do not answer with something that you can't literally ask them. So what are some bad answers for number 50? Seems certain, right? Well, I don't know if you're a fortune teller, right? I don't know. But cannot be attained, right? Versus may not. If you literally say cannot versus may not, there's a huge difference when it comes to the SAT, right? And then A and B work slightly better, right? Is inconsistent, they don't match up. Will be difficult. Will be difficult doesn't mean impossible, right? It could happen, it could not happen. So those are better phrases. Okay, 49. This is a science one, so keeping that in mind, which one do you think happens to be best for a science passage when you have 2 people? No. You refute claims in history sometimes, right? Sometimes. In more general terms, how do you illustrate in more general terms? Those words don't go together, right? So you could express reservations, right? When you get into science, you're not going to refute, you're not going to challenge or criticize, because then you're on public record being that guy who always challenges and criticizes, and nobody's going to like you. Back then in history, you did do that, right? You would call people out, you'd be like, hey, your idea is wrong, because they didn't have cancel culture back then. Right, so express reservation, I'm cautious, I'm hesitant, I'm not sure. So that's also another reason we don't like extreme language, because if you come out as an extremist, they're going to make memes about you. I think I gave this one yesterday. What do you think is this one for 40? D, right? Generally enjoyed. Remember, enjoyed is had. Generally enjoyed. So that also leaves room to interpretation, right? Sometimes they might not have had the similar rights or fewer rights or more rights or less rights, right? So again, that one's easy without even answering the question. And then 38. Now, this is a history passage. So now all holds are not barred, right? Now people are calling each other out and they're arguing and fighting or whatever. So which one is best in a history passage when people are calling each other out? Which one? B, dispute the assertion, right? Dispute the assertion. We're getting mad at your argument. A lot of people see A. What's wrong with A? It's insulting their education, right? These people do not insult each other's education. They insult each other's arguments or reasoning, right? So because of that, C could also be a correct answer, right? Your reasoning is flawed, not you are flawed as a person. So that type of nuance you want to be especially careful about. And this is what's going to happen when you're stuck between 2, right? Okay, I'm in a history passage. Am I going to dispute their education or am I going to dispute their argument? You need to pick apart the answers that specifically. Questions on that one? Okay, question type number 6. What do you see in all the answers here? It's something about word choice, right? What are they asking you to do with the word choice? Explain the effect. So we'll call like rhetorical analysis maybe, or the whatever you want to call it, right? The impact of word choice, impact of language maybe. I don't know. So what do you got to remember generally about all these people who are not historical people? So all the other passages, the science passages, the social science passages, they're journalists. What kind of tone are they using? Informative, that's true.
Conversational.
Conversational, that's the best word, right? Conversational tone. If you're too formal, you're going to turn away your reader, right? Journalists using a conversational, slightly informal, right? They're going to use slang. They're going to use like weird, I don't want to say cliches.
Analogies.
Analogies, yeah, right? In fact, what does analogy typically do? It takes a very difficult topic and makes it slightly more approachable. Okay, let's look at this one, right? Oh, what do we not want to do? Oh, don't answer literally. That's where students fall trap, right? So for example, for the first one, it says backbone, right? So then you're, oh, literally backbone. Okay, it's the main support of something. So A, only very long chains of DNA. Oh. Again, it's not literally a backbone, right? And so anything like only, it's more for rhetorical impact. It's likely D. The main structure is composed of repeating units. It could be B or C, right? B or D, right? Versus C says entirely of phosphate groups of sugars. I don't know. Yeah, so that's where we're getting that idea, right? So backbone gets translated there. 7, right? We're saying wandered or marched. So one wandered is more like, I don't know where I'm going, right? March is very intentional. So which one kind of says that? D, right? Yeah. Right, because wander, I don't know, wander works with ability to teach, right? So D, and I even like D even more because it says somewhat accidental, right? We're qualifying our things with more general language. Yeah, it could be A maybe. I didn't give you the context, so. Oh, I see a bad word in C, right? Anxious. Don't know about that one. Do not overuse the word anxious, please. 28's really hard to answer without the passage. But what about 16? Yeah, right. Slightly casual, slightly humorous, maybe. Not C, not deeply pessimistic, not mocking, right? Mocking is, you don't want to be the journalist who mocks everybody. And then D, right? Thoughtful yet uncertain, that totally works, right? Clueless, mind reading, that they front loaded this answer. Remember, on the wrong answer choices, they're going to front load the answer. Oh, I see, that makes sense. But then it casts doubt on the real world usefulness of experimental data. That's basically saying that you don't think anybody should do science experiments, right? Because it's useless. So please do not just stop halfway through an answer and be like, oh yeah, the first half sounds right. They rarely front load the answers with the bad info, right? It's always they back load the answers with the bad info. Questions on that one? Oh yeah, so then I think I did this with the class. I'm like, this is repeated, right? This is just more serves too. So 7 is kind of repetitious. Question type number 8.
What was it?
7 is just, it's another purpose one, right? Serves to, so I accidentally repeated. What's question type number 8? Graphs, right? Graphs and data. So for question 20, that's easy, right? Do they support or weaken? What do you think is more likely? Support, right? Why would you give answers that like contrast, right? So then whatever the answer is, right? It's either A or B. So you can eliminate really easily there. Now, when you get to which of the following statements is best supported by the graphs, what do you need to do to best answer a graph question? Look at the graph. Look at the axes, right? Look at the variables. That's where they're gonna try to trick you, right? If the variable is time, then you can answer how frequently, how long. If the variable is weight, then you can't answer how frequently, how long, right? But then students kind of just forget about that. So if it's weight, then it's how much or how heavy, right? If it's temperature, it's how hot or how cold. So please pay attention to the variables / units, because sometimes the answers just don't even make sense in terms of what they're measuring. Another thing you may want to do is look at the title of the graph, right? The title should give you some context. What you should not do not answer with opinions or things you cannot measure. So certain things that might be hard to measure. How important was it? How do you measure that? How friendly? Anybody think of other things that are hard to measure? How much you care, right? There are kind of ways you could try to measure, but then yeah, you could do a survey, right? And then he's like, 1 through 5, 5 being I care the most and 1 being I care the least. So it is possible, but most of the time it's going to be a little bit more data driven. So for example, let's look at 50. Oh, no, not that one. Let's look at 20. Are there any? Yeah, let's look at 20 here. Was there is there anything here? Well, they're all measurable, right? Yeah, frequency. 50 is just in general, right? So looking at general, like what does the graph do? Can anybody eliminate or right? Because typical, how do you measure if something's typical? I don't know. Right, so that's kind of a weird language. Yeah, how does a graph clarify ways? Right, what does a graph do? Gives data. It can clarify the number, right? It can clarify the amount, but like clarify the ways in which it probably C. You know what? The correct answer is actually B. Yeah. So the graph was basically, it was a graph of this particle versus the discovery of other particles. But again, C has the word regarded, right? Regarded is an opinion. How do you measure regard? It's hard in most science passages. This was from a science passage, right? Regard is I approve it, I respect it, I disrespect. And then question like number 18. So there's a keyword in the question stem that I want you to be aware of. Does anybody see the keyword in the question stem? Yeah, summarizes, right? Best. So what best usually means on the test is if it says best, it's even the best answer might not still be 100% correct, right? It's so like, But summarize, because a lot of students choose D because D was actually in the graph, but doesn't summarize, right? Yeah, right. C is a more summary language. So also pay attention to the scope of the question, right? Because 2 of them could be correct. I've also seen on the writing section, right? 2 of them are correct, but which one best answers the question, right? Which one best supports the claim? So if the claim was about recent years, then C would be better, right? In a writing passage, maybe it's like, oh, and then I have this specific info, right? And then you answer with D. So on the writing section specifically, you have to look at the context of what's written in the passage, because two of them could definitely be correct. Questions there? Okay. 9 is easy. What is that? Vocab and context. Okay. So again, this is the one where you want to orient yourself with the passage, right? Because then in history, what kind of words are tend to be better? In history, what types of words tend to be better? Maybe formal. I would argue more argumentative, emotional, yeah. Versus science, right? Science, then it's fairly casual, but then I also want you to think of science as more quantifiable, right? Things you can measure, things you can count. For example, this one is from a science passage, right? So which one is the most like measurable, countable for releasing? D, right? Emitting. You can measure the emitting part, right? Can you measure the amount of relief something gives you? Right? Can you measure how much you surrender? Can you measure how much you're dismissing? Right? So in science, I put myself in a very like, I'm a scientist. I want to do the experiment. Versus if this were from a history one, then a history would probably be like dismissing, right? I'm dismissing your argument. I'm dismissing your position. Right? So the context plays a huge factor here. And then what should you not do? Again, answer from the dictionary, right? The dictionary definition is probably wrong. Questions on that one? Oh, we went through all of it. Okay. Literature. What is the main purpose of literature passages? Too broad, too broad. Describe what kind of event? Important or significant event, right? That's one. What's another type of main purpose? It's either describe a important or significant event or describe a meaningful relationship, one or the other. What's the main structure of a literature passage typically? What do you start with typically? Backstory, we call that context, right? Context. Then what, the conflict? Is there a resolution? Maybe. It just cuts off usually. Yeah, it's usually just like the impact, but then we don't know no resolution, right? It's like they fought, and then what's gonna happen next? IDK, right? Then she ran out of the room, and then it ends out there, right? So typically no resolution. Remember that these are usually yoinked from a bigger book, and that's usually why there's no resolution, right? It's literally a slice of life. They literally sliced out page 30 or something like that. So then some of these like questions are pretty easy. Then what's the main purpose of the opening sentence? Yeah, right? So the hope is that like you can answer like the majority of the questions pretty quickly like this, and then like spend time on the tricky questions where I can't help you. What about number 2? What's the developmental pattern of the passage? Yeah, all right. Meaningful encounter. Could be D, right? Could be. Yeah, right. What's the bad word in A? Analysis, right? We don't analyze on the SAT. There's no room for analysis. We only have 300 words. A definitive response, again, we don't like that either, right? Nobody has that kind of thing unless you're some sort of supernatural being. What are some bad words in this number two?
Malicious.
Yeah, right. Malicious, that's a bad word. Any other bad words in number two? I don't like controversy for literature. Yeah, science, right? And then remember, controversy is the word that you have to have many people's opinions listed to even indicate that it's controversy. In a story, how are you going to get controversy when you have one author? Okay, so keeping that in mind, right? Again, orienting yourself with the type of passage. And then if we go to a British passage, this is from a British passage. What's the magic word for British passages?
Humor.
Humor, right? British passages are all about the irony, the incongruity of human behavior. Right? We have words like cruel. Unless they're literally torturing animals or something like that, we don't know if people are cruel. Again, unless they're literally saying it's unexpected, we don't know if surprising is a good word, right? Surprising is one of those words that's typically wrong. Typically, not always. So if you get a British passage, it's all about haha. Questions there? Okay. Some science, some natural science / social science. What is the main purpose of social science passages? Sometimes experiment. Could be human behavior. There's a broad word that covers both experiments and human behavior. Does anybody know that broad word that covers both of them? All right, that's the broad word that the SAT uses to capture everything. Phenomenon could be experiment, phenomenon could be an event, phenomenon could be a relationship. What's the main structure of these types of things? Brief intro, right? Some sort of background, right? Maybe some definitions, maybe, right? Then what do we do? Well, that's the setup. Huh? We describe the experiment, yeah. We describe the hypothesis, describe experiment, hypothesis, one or the other, right? Well, whatever it is. And then what do you do after we describe the experiment and hypothesis? Discuss the potential for its results. What's the word they use on the SAT all the time? Implications, right? So the word is implications. That's again the broad category, right? You present the phenomenon, you discuss its implications. And then what do some journalists do also? As one more thing that they add onto their passage. The implications is impact. Huh? Yeah, quotes. That's the implications. They also present the counter argument, right? That happens sometimes too, right? They have the counter argument or the concession. Literally, it's just those four things. Those four things capture 90% of the passages you're going to read, right? Intro, the thing that they did, what it means, and what some other people think. So then look at this number 11 here. What is the main purpose of this passage then? She is not. You need to give her, I'll text it over. No, it's the one I've been using for the class. Just a sec. Let me text everything. 11, yeah. Okay, what were you saying? I don't think it's A, right? Last century, right? These are written for the newspaper or for a magazine that's going to be published this week or this month, right? So they rarely talk about things that are in the past. Yeah. Advocate is for what? History. Yeah, D, right? Assess the impact. Yeah, right. Again, not argue. You could, okay, so I don't want to say like all of them are going to be discussion, right? Sometimes you might see a social science one that has a small argument, right? So it could be. Okay. Then let's have you look at 40, right? So they are, line 6 is the end of the first paragraph. So keeping that in mind, right? This is a purpose question and this is the end of the first paragraph. Supplant is too strong for D. The correct answer here was C. Yeah. It's the end of the first paragraph. Remember on purpose questions, you're going to look at where it is. What's the purpose of the last sentence of the first paragraph? The transition, true, but y'all should know this one. What they teach you at school. No. Thesis. They underline the thesis statement. And what is the purpose of a thesis statement? To present your claim that you will later support with evidence, right? So literally on this purpose question, we're going to zoom out and not be like, I don't care about this passage, right? I'm just looking at what the purpose is of a thesis statement. Thesis statements do not propose that you merge things, right? Especially two areas of scientific knowledge. That's be like, okay, we should combine zoology and ecology. So A would be an answer that is too literal, right? Zoology is ecology. Right, and then B says, will lead to expertise. That word expert is loaded, right? Expert means what? You go get your bachelor's and your master's and your PhD, then your postdoc, you have 20 years of education, right? So you have to be very careful with the words you choose. I know that it's easy to be like expert. I'm an expert. I played video games for 5 hours last night. I'm an expert. But the SAT uses these words very, very, very specifically. Questions there? Okay, history. What's the main purpose of history? Argue. Argue for what? Argue for change. So argue for change, especially if you're in the position of lacking power, right? Not everybody's lacking power, so sometimes you get the powerful people too, right? What do the powerful people do? Yeah, oh yeah, argue for the status quo, right? Argue against change or for maintaining status quo, right? Justify why we should keep the way, justify why we should keep things the same. Okay. What is the main structure?
They'll introduce the problem first.
They won't always introduce the problem first. A lot of times they do that, yeah. So they usually, not always, but they start with the counter argument. Especially if it's something bad, right? They'll be like, oh, you know, people have done this good for a while. And then they do the but, right? And there's the big but. So you're going to look for the but or however. And then what do you do?
Appeal to your audience.
Appeal to the audience, yep. And then for this one, what type of rhetorical devices do they use to appeal to the audience? In social science, where we use stats, quotes, blah, 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 blah. They use generalizations. What's an example of a generalization? Stereotypes, right? All people do this. All men do this, right? All people, the human mind, all men, right? So they use generalizations. What else do they use?
Anecdotes sometimes.
They sometimes use anecdotes or hypotheticals. What else do they use? Especially if we're talking about US history, what do they typically use a lot in US history?
The Constitution.
They use the Constitution, right? And ironically, both sides use the Constitution, right? The Constitution says that all men are created equal, so there should be no slaves. And then no, the Constitution says that slaves are 3/5 of a person or not a person, right? So they both argue using the same document, which is kind of ironic. And then the other thing they use God a lot, right? Remember, anything that gets too technical, they don't have, right? They don't have recordings. They typically don't have books unless they're like getting on horseback and riding to Washington, D.C. And then they also will use concessions, right? They'll concede, like, my opponent says blah, 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 and then of course they'll counter that. The other thing they love to use is they love to use rhetorical questions. We don't use them anymore, right? I'm sure many of your teachers have said don't use rhetorical questions in essays. Back then, their teachers didn't tell them that. Okay, so given that, what do you think the best answer for 32 would be here then in the context of the first paragraph? What is the main purpose of his first paragraph? It could be A, but we just talked about how these passages start, right? It could be. Huh?
E.
Which one?
B.
E as in dog, right? Yeah, E as in dog. It could be B, but what are we gonna do? We usually start with the opposite of argument, right? So, oh my God, the US is big and broad and amazing, right? Again, no context, so I'm not, don't worry too much about this, but it's the idea that history passages. Start with the other argument. 41, in the context of each passage as a whole, what do the questions of passage 1 and passage 2 do?
D.
Mm-hmm. What do people say wrong for this one? Wait, that's right.
Like undermine the person.
The person, yeah, which one says undermine the person? See, C kind of says it. Yeah, most people say A is the wrong answer, right? They cast doubt on the other, but it's not their sincerity, right? Both sides are sincere. I'm sincerely in favor of this. I'm sincerely against it, right? So A is a perfect example of a trap answer. It comes in as A, right? People read A, I'm like, that's good. I'm going to ignore all the other answers. Yes, so your answers must be 100% correct. We are not attacking their sincerity. We're not necessarily attacking their methods or their actions either, right? All of these all kind of say the same thing. We're criticizing their argument. I don't know why I include this one because we can't do that, but I just want you all to know indignation. What does indignation mean? Righteous anger, right? Anger for a reason, just in case it shows up. Yay. So history, right? Emotional charge, angry at people's arguments. Natural science experiment. We kind of did the experiment one again, right? So we do the background, we do the experiment, we discuss the implications. So that's the same as what we said over here, right? So very similar there. Let's look at some of these answers. Overall structure of this experiment, which one do you think is the best answer? Okay. B as in boy?
Yeah.
Cuidado. Cuidado for B. Why am I saying cuidado?
Because resolution class is completely.
Well, yeah, C is resolution is like 100% certain, right? So, but B, yeah, why am I saying be careful about B? Weaken the hypothesis. They again backloaded the answer choice. Everything about B sounds good until the word weaken. Would you really? I mean, you could. I don't want to say never, right? But would you really spend an entire essay and be like, here's everything and everything? Okay, and then this is why you're wrong. Again, you could, right? You could. You really could. And you might see that. If you see that on Saturday, I'll give you $5. But again, like support the hypothesis, right? Literally this one word takes everything and makes it wrong. And you have to get in that mind frame, especially if you're at the higher end of the spectrum, right? You got to know that they're gonna do things to make them tempting. So then it's not B, it's not C. So is A or D better? Yeah, A is just a list, right? Yeah, yeah, right. It's not like a thing that you see online, right? You got to talk about the implications, right? So we're resolution in science means like, oh, I resolved to do this, or like I'm 100% certain, right? We've resolved everything. In science, things don't get resolved. Even when people discover theories, right? It just opens more questions, right? Einstein didn't solve physics, right? He started the whole branch of, you know, what is the branch of physics that he started? I can't remember. Sean, you should know. Quantum physics or something, right? Is that what he started? Whatever Einstein did. That's what it is. Thank you. Right? He was so smart, but he didn't solve things. He just opened up a new branch of science. Okay. 43. Which one's a good answer for that one? Oh,
Which 43?
oh, this one on the.
No.
But endorsing a single explanation, why would they endorse it?
Yes, phenomenon, but again, Jen's right. Endorsing a single explanation. You do not do that in history, because then you're the guy who always gets everything wrong. The science, yeah. Did I say I meant science? You do not do that in history. You do not endorse a single explanation. Possible, right? Implications. Yes, we like that in history, right? We do not conclude in history. We do not come to a sorry, every time I say history, think of the word science. We do not conclude in science. We do not come to a consensus in science. We do not prove in science, right? Those words are way, way, way too strong for science. We're not endorsing something. So it could also be D, right? Exploited. Exploited means use something, but A is the typical answer for a typical science passage. Yeah? Hmm?
Why is it also that?
If you endorse a single explanation and they find out that you're wrong, yeah, right? So that's why scientists are very careful. And in science passages like may, could, might, right? You might see a passage that the scientist is like, yep, let's put all our eggs into this basket. Let's give $1 billion and build a satellite to Jupiter. So maybe then they're endorsing a single explanation. So when I'm telling you to avoid some of these answers, I'm not saying avoid them entirely. I'm saying be really cautious and see if there's actually text to support that argument. That's what I mean. Uh, 43, I don't think there's a definitive answer, but there are definitive bad answers for this 43. Probably not D, right? We're not going to summarize in the first paragraph. I think it could be C, right? I don't know about A either. Generally, I haven't seen one, right? So this one's sus, but then I think it could be either B or C, right? Because a lot of times science passages start with like, oh, a lot of people used to think that the sun was the center of the universe, but now, right? So that I've seen B be the start of a science passage too. Okay, any guesses on this 44? Provisional. It could be provisional, right? Provisional means like we're not yet certain. That's a good word. Any ones that you think it might not be? Yeah, C, right? Yeah, we're not analyzing anything in the passage. D, right? Probably not, right? Yeah. Like, what kind of question would you even ask, right? How much do people hate each other? Like, right? So it's probably, and then even for B, right? You're gonna ask a question like, is this what we're gonna talk about? Right? Like, what question are you gonna ask that's gonna introduce it? It's a question, right? Yeah, right. Okay, should we talk about Einstein's theory of relativity? Like, again, no rhetorical questions unless you're literally asking a question, right? Okay, so then general, let's look at some of these sciencey things. So sixth paragraph, right? Again, paying attention to where we are. So sixth paragraph is towards the end, right? These, maybe second to last paragraph. What do you think would be the best answer towards the end of the essay? D, right? Why was a value? Or you're explaining the significance. This is too early, right? This is in the middle, right? C would be in the middle, beginning to middle, right? So then we get to the end of the passage, we're explaining the significance. Okay, for this.
By too early, do you mean earlier in the passage? Or?
Yeah, contextualize, right? When we contextualize something, we contextualize early in the essay. Yeah, line 64 through 75 is towards the end. So paying attention to where you are in the story. For 52, it says the main purpose of the last paragraph. What's the worst word we can use here for last paragraph? It's not here, but just in, oh yeah, introduce. But there's another trap answer that they're going to do for this one.
Conclude?
Yeah, conclude. There's another trap word besides conclude. Can anybody else think of that?
Summarize.
Summarize. Those are the two words you need to be excruciatingly careful of, right? In the last paragraph, you're probably not going to conclude and summarize. Just in general, they ask you and then they're like, oh, it's not concluding. So huh? Discussing in the future, discussing implications, potential uses. I don't remember which one this was. It's probably not going to be D though. I don't think it's going to be D. And introduce an alternative. B. It could be B, right? Maybe A. I don't know. I don't remember which one this was. Maybe, but probably not, right? I think it's probably B if I had to choose. I don't remember which one this one is, but I would probably say B. Does anybody think otherwise? Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Last sentence of the essay. No. Oh no, hold on.
Well, I mean, I just
The potential. I said no because I saw resolution. Yeah, too strong, right? Too strong. I think it's B. I remember this one being B.
No, to be honest, I thought it was A. At least I remember this passage.
Was it C? A potential resolution? The only reason it works is it's a potential resolution, right? Potential resolution. But it could also be B, right? Like this is really important and we need to figure this out soon, right? It could be B. So that's what B would be saying. And C is like, once we get to there, this is what's going to happen for us, right? So B and C are good choices here. We do, again, reconcile or completely resolve, right? We want to be careful of completely resolve. Okay. I like this one a lot because it's just, this is based on vocabulary. Which one is the best vocab for science passages? Empirical evidence, right? This is an easy one. If you see this one, note that all science is founded on empirical evidence. What do people choose? Mostly is the wrong answer. Mostly people choose D. What's wrong with D? Guessing, right? We are not guessing in science. We're using real facts. We're using real lab equipment, real money, blah, 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 blah. Oh, did you? Okay. Okay. Okay, this one, 22. So we're making an assumption about octopuses, and then how would you regard this one scientist, or how would other scientists regard him?
A, maybe.
You're saying aviar?
Yeah.
Maybe A potentially.
Yeah,
No, I don't think they'd be embarrassed by it.
yeah. Too strong, right? Too strong.
A is
Yeah,
probably
actually,
Yeah,
everything else kind of.
yeah.
Having acceptance, like.
But basically, the whole point is to get rid of these strong words, right? Without context, I don't know. I don't remember if it was A or D. Okay. 45, it can reasonably be inferred from the passage that Marton's research interest should be considered unusually insightful, somewhat questionable, properly cautious, or initially secondary. Which ones can we get rid of?
I remember this one. I was debating it.
I remember this one too, but I got it wrong again.
B, probably you can eliminate.
Yeah, why would you say that a scientist is somewhat questionable? And why would you base your conclusions on an atypical sample, right? That's bad science. Most of these scientists are good scientists. I think there's another one we can cleanly eliminate, right?
Feel-
Again, how do we measure how insightful somebody is, right? So then C, we could say that's true, right? But I feel like that's an assumption that everybody's going to do. All scientists are probably going to check their work multiple times, right? The correct answer here was D. And this is just in general, this happens in science, right? You're doing one study and they're like, oh, wow, I found this new thing. That's so cool. Let me move to this thing now. That's what that one is saying. It was seaweed and trees.
Yeah, it's like,
The thickness of seaweed. Yeah. Okay. Any questions on that? Okay, yay, we finished the reading. Any questions overall in reading? No questions overall in reading? Okay, let me take a quick breather then we'll go on to grammar section. Okay, let's recall what the general structure is of a paragraph. What do we do with the first sentence? Context, introduction, right? Start, introduce. Yep, introduce topic, make your claim. If you're in the middle of an essay and like the third body paragraph or something, you can often transition as well, right? So this is especially important for the grammar section because you think about maybe the sentence has one end that links to the sentence above it, and the other half that links to the sentence below it. This is especially important for sentence placement questions, right? You want something like, think of dominoes, right? The dominoes, you have to have one end that links up with the end before and one link that ends up with the one after it. What do we do after the introduction? Elaborate with what? Evidence, right? Concrete details. What are some examples of concrete details? Stats. What else? Quotes. What else? I think that's it. Specific examples, right? Specific info, right? But the whole point is if it's highlighted in the reading section, right? The purpose of the second sentence is typically to support the sentence that comes before it. So on the reading section, you go back to find the claim sentence. On the grammar section, you want to make sure you plug in a very narrow sentence here with something very specific, right? Okay, then what do we do afterwards? We give our quotes, stats, whatever. Then what? Explain how or why it matters. This is called your commentary, right? You explain the significance or how it ties into your arguments. Right? You can't just say that, 9 out of 10 people brush their teeth every day. Why does it matter? And then what do we do? They say conclude, that's how they teach you in an essay, but typically we don't conclude, right? What do we do instead? Transition to the next one, right? That's typically the structure, right? So on the writing section, the transition sometimes comes at the end of the paragraph, sometimes comes at the beginning of the paragraph. We don't know where. So it could be either place, right? Okay, so question number 40. The writer wants a conclusion to the sentence and paragraph that logically completes the discussion of the Silver Age and provides an effective transition to the next paragraph. Which choice best accomplishes this? Yeah. Oh yeah, this is the sentence, right? The general structure of a paragraph type. Sentence placement, sentence position, whatever you want to call it. No, we don't. Of course, I'm giving you limited context, so you have to guess a little
Yeah,
bit.
C, you're right, C.
Why C?
Like, not only is like concluding that section
Mhm.
about the golden age, and it's going into the silver age.
I
Yeah,
think the all yellow is better.
yeah, and it drew to a close, right? Yeah, and it says completes the discussion, right? Drew to the close. So then that one's clear from the language, right? It wants you to use some sort of concluding language. Okay, so that one was C. Okay, question type number 2. What is this?
Must be separate here.
What kind of question is number 2? It's not a grammar question. Setting up information, yeah. So we could consider this like a word choice question. Word choice, sentence choice. Which one do you think is the best one here? A? No.
It's not.
Oh, B, because they mentions free later on.
Yeah, it's B. Everything else is redundant,
Yeah, so you want to avoid redundancy, right? A is redundant because it says free. Do not just choose it without reading it. A lot of times with these like sentence choice ones, I finished reading the paragraph. Their value cannot be measured. They are especially valuable. That's contradictory, right? That's the literal contradiction, right? When it comes to the free services. So this one's actually easy, but they're not going to make it that easy, right? This one says set up the examples at the end of the sentence. What are the examples? Online job searches, resume, and job material development, right? Those are words that go link with economic recession, right? Economic recession implies a lack of jobs. So a lack of jobs means they're helpful with job and material resume stuff, right? So what to do? Avoid wordiness. And then read the whole paragraph first, right? Okay, question type number 3. This one's easy. You see it in the question, right? Effective combination. What does effective combination mean to do? What's the phrase I want you all to remember? Simplify, that's true. Short and smooth, right? Short and simple, short and smooth, right? Yeah, effective combination. Short and smooth. Short and smooth. So let's do this 29 first. Let's do example 29 first. Out of these ones, which one is shortest and smoothest?
C.
29 first. We're doing 29 first, and then we'll go back to 18. I hear everything. I hear C, B, D.
Whereas architectural features.
No, we're doing 29 first. 29 first. B, right? Okay, so why is it not C? Which is fine, right? But it's wordy. Anytime you have to be verbs, right? To be verbs tend to muck things up with wordiness. Their opinion is, again, these are all grammatically correct. In fact, all of these would all be grammatically correct, yeah? But then this is unnecessary extra verbiage. Versus the dash allows you to make things shorter. It removes the extra fluff. Okay, so that one's B. That one's the shortest one. Now let's look at 18, right? Because technically they're all of the same length. So which one would work better here? B. Right, their planar rooms are sparsely furnished, but then just as true to the periods they represent. Right, so usually if something's sparse means empty, not stylistic, something like that. So that's why but would be the best one here. C, I've also seen C be true for certain questions, right? When do we use the colon here? What does it mean? Yeah.
Elaborating or an extra.
Elaborating, or if we use the colons, like both halves are equal, right? Both halves are equal, mean the kind of the same thing. And in this case, the both halves aren't equal to each other, right? Sparse doesn't mean just as true to the periods, right? They don't carry the same connotation. Okay, so that's 18 and 29. Short and smooth, generally speaking, right? Avoid interruption, that sort of stuff. Oh, I gave 4 examples on this one. Okay, let's do the shortest and smoothest for number 13 then. Right, the A is not, all these are correct, right? Comma and is separating, right? That's a separation, so that's why that one's bad. Known as political machines in the 1860s and 70s, right? So that's the interrupting, right? So if we can avoid interrupting, that's great. Sometimes you have to. Okay, that's why B is bad. City governments were taking control of, right? That's called passive voice. We usually should avoid passive voice, right? So A, B, and C all have specific reasons they're not as effective. 24. Oh, I don't even have it in the passage. It's interesting. It's not here. Oh, well, just choose the out of there.
Well, you can try to guess it without seeing it.
Yeah, but all the answers are here though. So just pick the best one out of these 4 without the passage. I hear a vote for B. I hear a vote for A. Team A. Team B.
No, it's just this idea that it's always so very attractive.
So why is it not Team C then? Why is Team C bad? Comma and, right? So I used to think comma and one time I got it wrong when there was no comma, right? So just be careful, right? If you have an and without a comma, it's usually combining. But the comma and usually is separating, yeah? So why is it not D then? Interrupting, right? So we're breaking it. It's not smooth, right? So that's why it's not C and D. Now we have SAT's least favorite word. What is SAT's word that's wrong 99% of the time in one of these 2? There is a word that is 99% of the time wrong. No. What is the word here? 99% wrong. No.
Being.
Being is 99% wrong. Yeah, it is B, right? With the idea, obviously, you don't even need to say being, right? With the idea, obviously very attractive. right? To be verbs, is, are, was, were, being, right? Those are prime choices for wordiness. Do not choose being. And so here we like the colon, right? The colon is showing equal signs. It is very attractive and it's used for emphasis here. In fact, if you see it on the writing or the reading section, usually that means this is the main idea. Hey, look at my argument. Look at me, right? So colon is like a look at me type thing. Short and smooth. Yay. That's where I was supposed to go. I went on the wrong page. Okay, question type number 4. Oh, I spoiled this yesterday for those of you who were here yesterday. What kind of question is number 4? Dangling modifier. So for number 21, right? Number 21, we made it clear which one it was, right? What was approaching the doorway? The lion was approaching the doorway, right? The lion snares the envelope. Okay, so that was 21. Okay, let's look at this 21 now. Example 1. What do you think is the best one for example? The first example. Because the lion's teeth were not the thing that were technically approaching the doorway. C, a D.
No, I got two.
2 for D, 1 for C.
What's the dotted thing? Is it the drawer?
Oh, yeah, this one, there was the one dot
Oh,
with the
okay.
knob.
Yeah. What was dotted with the knobs? It was the drawers, right? Yeah, I don't think there'd be a bunch of knobs on a human. Well, yeah. You never know. Yeah. Right? So this is the modifier, right? In English, you always place the modifier immediately before or immediately after the thing, right? And usually indicated by a comma, not always though, right? The drawers were the things that were dotted with the tiny pin-sized knobs. Okay, so what should you do? I didn't have this here. So what indicates a dangling modifier question again? Usually an ing or ed phrase, right? Dotted, dangling, painted, right? And then usually the ing or ed phrase without a clear subject. And then what about the answers? What makes the answers indicate that it's a dangling modifier? They're similar, but in different order, right? Similar answers all switched around, right? Lion snares the envelope. The envelope is snared by the lion. The visitor was dotted with pin-sized knobs. The drawer was dotted, right? It's the same words, all just jumbled around. So that's very clearly telling you, hey, make sure you're describing the proper thing with the proper modifying phrase. Most commonly missed question, I would say, is this one.
Really?
I would argue that.
Really?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
How if you like sound it out in your head, it just sounds like you.
It's not blasphemy. I tell the truth.
You got the numbers on that?
I don't have the numbers. Question type number 5. What is this?
Oh, the add.
Add or delete, right? There's a phrase that I use here that I don't think I haven't mentioned recently. Is it significant? I don't even remember what that means. Is it specific and relevant? That's the phrase I use. Oh my gosh, it's been so long since I said it. Is it specific? Is it relevant? Okay, so I put a couple questions here because most of you can get it right, but these two are the ones that people have missed statistically speaking. So don't miss this number 34. Tell me what you think. Should you, this 34, yeah, should you keep it or delete it, right? You want to keep it if it's specific and relevant, right? It's related to the topic we're talking about. So do we delete it?
Yeah, it's finding what manuscript recipe looks like.
It's pretty, well, I first thought it was all for the news, but now you feel like.
Oh, no, yes, because like in the first thing, it's talking about various collected books.
But that might just be.
No, but it doesn't say what
Oh, that's
manuscript
true.
recipe
It
looks
says,
like.
the title of this passage is this year.
Two people vote B, two people vote C. The correct answer is actually C. It looks like it is already stated, right? A manuscript recipe book. What is a manuscript? A manuscript is a thing that's handwritten, right? But then the thing that clarifies here, it says handwritten by the people who use them. So it's not merely repeating anything. It added just a hair extra, right? When you got to be careful with the repetition, it has to be like literally word for word. If it didn't say that, then it would have been B. So that one is a very tricky one. 26 is also a very tricky one. Yes, 26. Let's say ye.
I think it's saying the amount of carbon dioxide is increased. So isn't it contradicting the fact that yeah, it's contradicting the fact that the CR's situation is helping fight global warming. The amount of carbon dioxide is a sign.
Well, do they specify the connection between carbon dioxide and?
No.
I think that's an important connection to it.
I think carbon dioxide is generally, it's not something.
Correct answer is A. We don't like the word contradict. I don't think it contradicts. I don't like the word contradict. I don't think it contradicts, right? These two things can coexist. The sea urchins can help with global warming while carbon dioxide is still increasing. Those are not mutually exclusive things. Yeah, the whole purpose of these is also to explain, right? The whole purpose, you add details so that you can explain. If you get rid of it, it says that the carbon dioxide has increased 40%, but it doesn't give you a time frame. If it didn't increase 40% since yesterday, we'd all be on fire and stuff like that, right? So the word since is a very loaded word, right? Since needs a comparison point. But then again, please remember, contradict is 98% wrong, 98% wrong. Again, this is not a clear contradiction yet, right? Earlier we had the contradiction, I can't remember what it was, but literally two things couldn't happen at the same time. Instead, if we were to say no, it would blur, right? It would blur the focus. They like blur the focus, digress, shift, those types of weird words that you would never use in an essay. Hello. Do you want to ask Catherine in the front for a chair? We can skip it. Okay. So blur typically works. Blur shifts the focus. Blurring is a better word if it's off topic. Yeah, because usually what happens is it'll be off topic, right? You're talking about like, I don't know. You're talking about birds and then they introduce the idea of puppy. It won't outwardly contradict, right? Two sentences probably do not contradict. Okay, so then that's that idea. And then here we need the context, right? So again, I gave you two really confusing ones. Most of them is just like, okay, if it's specific, you keep it, right? If it's off topic, you get rid of it, choosing blur or digress. Questions there? Okay, question type number 6. We have the sentence placement one, right? Sentence placements are really annoying. You got to read the whole paragraph, right? So we go in this order, right? One, I do the domino thing, right? Domino is the easiest one. You just link the two sentences together. Okay, two, you might do the time order, right? Sometimes it's time order. You figure out the time order, that's easy. Then three, the hardest one is you have to look at verb tense. We're gonna go in that order when you do the sentence placement. Okay, so let's look at example number 1 then. This is in the back of the binder. Yep, where are we placing sentence 2? What say you all? D, right? D. After, right? Sentence 5, after means we're going to put it here, right? And this one we use the domino thing. It says the result of her calculation was the minimum donor price, and only donors who paid the minimum price were allowed to attend, right? Though the price for her tickets, sometimes it's that easy, right? You find the word or synonym very similar and you just like link them all together. You can't say though the price without establishing the word price first though, right? So that's the easy method, right? You just link them together. This one's a harder version. Okay, so 42. I want to play sentence 5.
I go after sentence 6 because it says while they wait, right? And then we refer to the participants, right? This is the sentence 4 is talking about the participants, and sentence 6 says while they.
This one we're asking to play sentence 5, right? We're placing this one.
So
Yeah.
by moving 5 after 6, and 4 and 6
connects
become combined. Yeah.
Connects 4 and 6. Yeah, okay. 4 and 6, right? We need to connect that, right? So that's a smart way of doing it, right? We need to connect 4 and 6, so 5 cannot be where it is now. I completely agree. But then there's no word in sentence 4 that connects to 6, right? Or 5, right? Yeah, right. What's that word there? Inaugural. First one, right? So since the first repair cafe, okay. Let's look at tense. What tense is this in? Others have been hosted. What tense is that? Present perfect tense, right? Present perfect tense. If you all remembered, present perfect tense is the glue that links past tense to present tense. More like an actual fair than a cafe. The first repair cafe took, simple past, right? It was the brainchild. Her goals were simple Participants bring all manner. Shift from past to perfect. So then since goes after sentence 3. So that's what I mean by sometimes it's easy. You link it, find a word, just stick them together, right? Maybe there's time order, they give a chronological order, right? But then the third one, gotta know your verb tenses, right? Putting things in order verb tense wise. There's never gonna be a time where there's no clue that's good enough to help you do it, right? Or there's no clue to help you do it. There's always gonna be some clue. Yeah.
I realized that it's like the sentence that says water, patrons. I thought it was like water.
Hmm. I see. But honestly, sometimes you figure out, okay, you got to move it because the other two around it actually go together. That's another good technique to look at, right? Because then there's a domino between those two. But I actually do think these patrons are the participants. Are they? No, maybe they're not. Maybe they're not. They're not. Never mind. But anyways, it's after sentence 3 because of a verb thing, right? Okay, so we did the order, right? Dominoes, time order, verb tense. Okay, what are these questions? Question time number 7. Detail, right? Add detail. Okay, when it says add detail, what do you need to be careful of then? Yeah, yeah. But then what else makes a good detail? Yeah, so avoid redundancy or unrelated. What makes for a good detail then? Yeah, it needs to be specific. Specific. Concrete. Let's go with concrete, right? So for example, in number 2, which ones are not specific or which ones are not concrete details? Yeah, which one is not then? So C, right? C is not a concrete detail. It says it's more desirable. That's not a concrete detail. That's an opinion. Yeah, D is an important, that's not a concrete detail. Again, that's an opinion. So when you have the word detail means specific, detail means related, right? And then of course, you got to tie it back to the claim sentence, right? The claim sentence always comes before, right? Number of uses for acid way. Which one is a better use, A or B? B, right? Do not rely on sound, rely on context clues. Acid whey, that's like when you make cheese and all the like the liquid stuff that comes out of the milk. It's that liquid in yogurt. That's the whey part. Yeah, that like watery stuff, the watery stuff. That's whey. Yeah. Yeah. Is it? It's acid whey. I don't know. Okay. 31. So now this one says, which one gives a second reason and additional support? So this one's slightly different. And they're asking you to add a second thing. So if they ask for a second thing, do you know what the implied instructions are? There's implied instructions here again, because SAT doesn't want to be clear with you. Oh yeah. Structure, right? The implied thing is whenever you list more than one thing, they should be structurally similar, aka parallel, right? Parallel structure. Right? Both of these questions are leaving out. Yeah? Yeah. They're not structurally similar. But it's also like a tangent, right? Because it says they discarded the plan. It was far too beautiful. So they discarded the plan because it would later come to symbolize, like, are they like fortune tellers? They would want it up there, right? They would want to hoist it up because it would symbolize and everybody looks up and like, oh my God, so beautiful. But anyways, it's like off topic. It doesn't match the style. It doesn't match the tense, right? So a lot of people choose C for whatever reason. I'm not, because it probably sounds pretty, right? C sounds very pretty. But then D is parallel in structure, and it also is a reason, right? Why are we not hoisting it? It's too heavy. I don't know why people don't want to choose D, maybe because it sounds bad, right? Because it does the interruption. Oh, okay. So again, this is an example in the writing section, right? They're gonna put in nasty sounding things, but you just have to be able to read between the lines, right? So this would not work for an effective combination question, right? Because it is kind of interrupting, but this does work for a parallel structure question. Okay, question type number 8. This is, if you look at the questions, it almost always shows up at the end. I'm gonna guarantee you that you're gonna see one around the late 30s, early 40s. What is this one? Yeah, they're all these 43s and 44s. These aren't transitions.
And that of those.
That of those of, what are those called? What are that ofs and those ofs? That ofs and those ofs. They are not participial phrases. They are not participial phrases. They are not gerund phrases. They are now.
Pronouns.
Wait, what?
I'm not gonna get a try.
What did you say, Veer? It was a Veer or Yash?
Pronouns.
They're pronouns. These fall into the category of logical comparison, right? And then the phrase is gonna be that of those of, right? Those are gonna be comparison, right? So you're gonna see that or those, and they are pronouns. And so that is singular, right? And then those are plural. And then you're always going to replace the that or the those with the thing that they're replacing. So the first 44, for both commercial and arguably creative reasons, then no transition was more successful than, which one? Than that of, than the transition, right? We're going to replace it just to make sure it is a logical comparison. We're comparing transition to transition, C. Okay, next 44. What are those? Pressures, right? So, and it makes sense, right? We're comparing, they face pressures, the other ones faced pressures. So then it is D, right? Plural is a logical comparison. Okay, 43 then.
The evil one.
C. What are,
No, actually, that's correct.
Wait, yes. I don't know why.
You put the evil one in.
I put the evil one
The
in.
page separation.
I
It's
put the
something and cost and benefits for two-share. I usually have those for.
Oh, that's-
There was a page separation.
okay,
that's
I
not there.
just felt that there had to be like, it couldn't be that of, like,
Yeah,
right?
institutions, yeah.
But at the same time, cost of benefits from singular, right? So that,
All right, you see the word for here, right? So for parallel reasons, right? We
there's
see,
why I had this word too. I used to put it too.
Um,
Memory recall from this word.
so then those encountered by, right? So there's a parallel structure thing here. Somebody caught me in here. I didn't include the whole sentence, right? And the reason I didn't include the whole sentence is because it came after a page turn.
It's not important.
So if you look at example 4 includes the line from before the page, right? Job sharing initiatives may also include some extra cost for companies since the salaries and cost of benefits for two sharing employees are usually higher than those for. Yeah, being is not correct. That of is probably not correct because the parallelism is off, right? If you say this for that, and then the other one should be for, right? I cannot guarantee that there'll be a page turn trick. There might be, I don't know, who knows? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, they put it,
that is evil.
Ooh.
yeah, so people wonder why, like, when they look at the page, and then they see like half the page is empty, right? I don't know why half the page is empty. There's no work for you to do, but they leave half the page empty for whatever reason. So there you go. Yeah, maybe, I don't know. So just paying attention to page turns, right? So the bad habit that students have is they read a half sentence, right? And that's why a lot of students get questions wrong. They read a half sentence. Got to consider the context. Okay, logical comparisons, questions 38 through 44, somewhere in there. Okay, then what is this one? Okay, best transition, right? Best transition. Okay, best transition, yay. So this is another one where you got to figure out the tone or style of the passage. I double dipped this question last time too. So look at number 10. I included enough in that paragraph though. Check out that paragraph that I gave you. YC?
They mentioned given the clear benefits.
Given the clear benefits, right?
Like clear benefits and something objective, so
No, other way around. Clear benefits should be an argumentative essay. Yeah, benefits are opinions, right? So this is an argumentative / persuasive essay. And if you have an argumentative / persuasive essay on your test, you want to use argumentative / persuasive language, right? So benefits or drawbacks, pros, cons, those type of language, right? So then we want to use armed with these facts versus if we had a neutral balanced paragraph, we're like, well, sometimes this is good. Well, sometimes this is bad. Then B would have been the better answer. Right, so this is another one where you just can't rely on sound because your sound probably leads people to choose B because they're taught to write that way, right? You're taught to be like balanced or like mid, right? Very mid for everything. Yeah, so here, this is a strongly positive thing, so you use strongly positive language. So try it again with this example. Okay, so the correct answer here is C, right? It could be spurred or motivated because we're talking about promoting beaver populations, right? So promoting, and then remember these or this always points back towards the sentence before. So again, this is like the idea of the dominoes, right? So what are these? Are they, is it an opportunity? No, it's data, right? It's a science passage, so findings. Okay, so for these ones, you gotta pay attention to tone, right? Pay attention to tone. Is this the last one? Yeah, last one. Then we get to do math. Yay. Okay, last one. Probably the second highly missed questions. What are these? Subject verb agreement. How do we recognize? All the same words but different endings, right? So a couple ways you can try subject verb agreement. You can try putting it and they before. So for example, for number 18, right? It would be it inhabits. B would be they inhabit. C would be they are inhabited. D would be they have inhabited. So in this case, it's actually really easy, right? The odd one out's the correct one, right? It, they. Oh, is it wrong though? Shoot, it's not it. Oh my God, it isn't it. I did it wrong. What's the subject here? Well, give me one word. Kinds. Wow, my technique didn't work for this one, right? We have to search for the subject. And what do we do to search for the subject? We got to eliminate prepositional phrases, right? So many different kinds. It's not the wildlife. The kinds inhabit, they inhabit. Wow, this trick didn't work for this one. So better to find the subject. The subject is kinds. Right, many different kinds inhabit, not the wildlife. It could be D. Yeah, but I guess I didn't put enough, but everything else was in simple present tense, right? And everything else, there was no have or has earlier. Yeah, it could have been C too, depending on the context too, because they all fit for they. Yeah, inhabited by beaver ponds, it doesn't make sense, right? Yeah, so that's passive voice. Okay, example 16. What is the subject here?
No, it's he. Yeah, for a study.
Study, right? By a team of Canadian scientists. That is your prepositional phrase, right? So for your study, it provides. So this one actually works, right? Because then A would be they provide, right? C would be they provide, they are providing. So this one works. The odd one out worked here. Yay, didn't work for that one. Okay, cross out prepositional phrases, right? And then look for the subject. Okay, number 35.
Is it D?
Why?
Because there's different subjects.
Where?
Writer Gertrude staying her brother Leo, and they're
Yeah, right. Example 3 is your example of an inverted sentence, right? They put the prepositional phrase at the beginning, so you could still cross that out, right? We don't need at the eye of the modern art storm. So literally, these three things were at the eye of the modern art storm, right? So what do a lot of people do? Oh, it was Gertrude's sign, so they just stick there. And then we know it's past tense because it says it all began, right? Past tense. So this is the highest level of subject-verb agreement trickery that you might face with an inverted sentence. Or if you want to use it in your writing, right? You can start. I was in the library. In the library was I. My dog is on the table. On the table is my dog. Questions there? Okay. If no questions, I think there's one more person who might be coming. Okay, so most of this is going to be just more about strategy than anything. I should actually grab my calculator just in case I need it.
And theoretically, we should all be able to do these all types of videos, like amazing students that we are.
I don't know if they're alive though. I think I need that one for the monitor. This
Does
one
anyone
is,
not have like mandatory sensitivity? Maybe all get some.
They just gave them to us.
Wow.
Oh.
Make sure you charge your calculator tonight.
Can we bring like 2 calculators?
You can bring 2 calculators. You could bring 2 TI-84s if you
How
want
about
to.
like?
You're allowed one on your desk.
I don't know. I remember
Interesting,
someone bring
like
the
a science
SPSAT, their calculator died.
So for those of you who have suspicious calculators, you might want to bring a backup. They allow you a backup.
What denotes a suspicious calculator?
If it's gonna die or something on you.
Oh.
No, like.
Oh, I thought you were
Right,
like.
I thought you were like.
I
Wait.
Oh,
Oh.
no.
No, that was
Josh, you had a question?
Are like TI-83 like graphing calculators allowed?
Yeah.
I thought.
So just make sure it's charged, right? You don't want your calculator to die on you at the last second.
Like how often, like on the calculator section, you actually need the calculator?
They say that any question can be done without the use of a calculator.
Yeah.
So,
But like, it can be very helpful.
Yeah. Like, you don't ever need to really graph, right? Like,
no, but graphing can help
Well,
you.
if I don't know how to do it, I resort to graphic.
Okay. Technique number 1, what's the shortcut? Not math. What is a non-math shortcut?
wait, what, how are you supposed to
I
solve
feel like
that?
it's like.
Without
Oh,
math.
like, oh, okay. Oh,
What's
it's
a
gotta be, like,
non-math?
C.
I want to say 20, this is square.
It's gotta be like C.
Uh-huh. But what's the non-math shortcut? How do we do it without doing math? We'll have to do some math though.
Like, I don't, what constitutes not that?
Plug into.
Yeah, plug into. Yeah, right, that's the non-math shortcut. Yeah, x is equal to 2, right? When you have letters in the question, letters in the answer, right? So 2 plus 3 times 2 is equal to 6 plus 2 is 8, right? And then 16, 16 minus 81 times 16, then it becomes difficult, right? But you could do it this way, 16, we know that x to the 4th is 16 also, so 81 times 16. So this is an interesting trick, right? They both have 16s, you can factor out a 16, right? 1 minus 81. Yeah, so it's equal to, these cancel out, right? Divide both of them by 8. So it's 1 over 2 times negative 80. Yeah, 1 over negative 160. So it's not this one. I think we could have figured out it was still a fraction, right? Because it's bottom heavy. And then we figure out which one's negative 160. And so this one would be 1 over 8 minus 27 times 8. Again, we can do the same thing, right? Factor out the 8, 1 over 8 times 1 minus 27. So 1 minus, and then there's no way you're going to get 160 out of this, right? 8 times this is not going to give you a whole number. So see, that's the complicated non-math way of doing it, which required just as much math.
Yeah.
But for a simpler question, right, you can always plug in numbers, or if they showed up on calculator, this is non-calculator, right? If it showed up on calculator, you could just plug in a number to the question answers. Because it's number 9, right? This wouldn't be on the non-calculator as number 9. It's okay. Technique number 2. What do we do on this one without necessarily doing too much math? Because the math way is actually harder.
It has to be only number 3 because if it's square rooted, it has to be a minimum of 0, and then you have to add 2, so it has to be a minimum.
Right, this is a minimum of 0, right? This is plus 2, so this is x has to be greater than 2, right? So we already know that. So that helps. Or they give you the answers, right? Answers is plug it in, right? Because if you actually try to solve this mathematically, I think it's negative 2. Negative 2 works if you solve it mathematically, right? The extraneous roots, very common trap answer, right? Students just blindly solve without thinking about the context. So very common answer, very common question, I mean. Technique number 3, what is the best technique for solving this without too much math?
Graph it.
Graph it, right? Graphing is your best friend. We have the root formed. Where are the 2 roots of this parabola? -3 and -1. And if we really want to do it, where does the vertex fall?
Halfway.
Exactly halfway, right? At -2. So x would equal -2. So it's this one, right? But graphing, right? Graphing is your best friend on the non-calculator section, right? So the vertex is always exactly halfway between the roots. Vertex is the midpoint of the roots. Okay, technique number 4. What could we do with this one without actually doing the math? I know you all know how to do the math. How do we do this one without actually doing the math? No plugging in here. We already did the plugging in techniques. What's the difference between this one and the other one? So this one had an equation, this one had an equation, this one had an equation. This one has a figure. What could be an approach if you have a figure? Using the figure to your advantage? Right, because it didn't say not drawn to scale, right? Unless otherwise stated, we assume that figures are drawn to scale. So if this is 4, right, you can use like the tip of your pencil to like kind of like figure out how long it is, right? So if this is 4, like this is about 4 on DE, right? This is about 4. So DE is 6. I literally think that's the answer. Let's see if that is indeed the answer, right? Like it's there to give you context though, because what if you did the math and you got all of a sudden it was 12, right? There's no way, right? So it's there not to like give you a hack. It's there to also allow you to justify your reasoning. Because sometimes in the pressure of the moment, you do something wrong by accident. And you're like, oh yeah, the answer is 12. So how are you supposed to do this when tan of b is 3/4, right? So this is 3/4. So then this would be 3x, right? And this would be 4x. Yeah. We don't know what it is. But then what is BE? BE would be 5x, right? Yeah. It's a 3, 4, 5 triangle, magic. Okay. So then same thing for the big triangle, right? This would be 3y, this would be 4y, right? And this would be 5y. So we actually know the thingies of the big triangle, right? So this is 15. This would be, what was that, 9, right? So AC would be 9. And then AB would be 12, right? It's 9, 12, 15. So then this one, if this whole thing is 12, right? Then this thing would be 8, right? If this is 8, right? 4x is 2. So this would be, DE would indeed be 6, right? It's a 6, 8, 10 triangle. So if you do some crazy math and you get 12, then you know you're wrong. Okay, so use the figures to your advantage if it says figures, or if it doesn't say figures not drawn to scale. Questions on that one? Okay, just a quick review of all the things you need to know. What is linear form? Y equals mx plus b. How do you find the x-intercept? Y is 0, right? Y-intercepts at x equals 0, right? There you go. Exponential form. A times b to the x, right? This is the initial value, right? That's your starting point. And then what does the b represent? Scalar. They won't use the word scalar though. What? Ratio. Sometimes they say like the compounding rate. Compounding rate versus linear form would be the constant rate, right? Constant rate. What is the quadratic standard form? X squared plus bx plus c, from which you can determine the what? No, you cannot from this form. You can determine the y-intercept, yes, without any manipulation, right? Y-intercept is c, and then vertex is negative b over 2a, right? From here. And then you can determine if it's a happy or sad face, right? Okay. Quadratic vertex form. Y equals, same a value, right? A parentheses, x minus h squared plus k, whereas here the vertex is h comma k, right? And what's the code word for vertex? No, if it's negative in the equation, it'd be positive h here. What's the code word for vertex? Maximum or minimum, right? Maximum or minimum. Yes. It would be negative b over 2a, comma, f of negative b over 2a, right? Where you plug it back into the equation to find the vertex. What is the quadratic root form? X minus, we'll do p's and q's, right? Mind your p's and q's. Right, from this you can determine what the roots, the intercepts, the solutions, the intercepts, right? And then how do we find the vertex from here? Average of the two, right? P plus Q over 2, we average those, right? F of P plus Q over 2 to find the average of those. Quadratic form, x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. From here, you can find the sum or the product of the roots also, right? Sum of roots is what? Negative b over a, negative b over a, right? Sum of roots, because we add the negative b over to a. And then bonus for those of you who want product of roots, probably not going to show up, but just for overachievers, it's c over a, product of roots. Circle formula. X minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared, right? Based off of Pythagorean theorem. Thoughts, questions on those 7 so far? Okay, things you must remember: 2 lines, no solution. Same slope, different y-intercept. AKA, how are these 2 lines related? Parallel lines, right? Same slope, different y-intercept. Parallel lines. 2 lines, infinite solution, same slope. Same y-intercept. Same line, same slope / y-intercept. Same equation. Line and parabola, no solution. What the heck? What is that? All right, b squared minus 4ac will be less than 0, right? You set them equal to each other. You get a quadratic equation, but you cannot solve the quadratic equation, right? So negative discriminant, right? You set the 2 equations equal to each other and you cannot solve. Yeah, you get an imaginary solution, right? Then line and parabola, multiple solutions. What's the max number of solutions you can have? 2, right? So then here you get b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0, right? You can actually solve. One solution is equal to 0, yep. And then percent increase, decrease, right? There's 2 ways to do it. You can do original, right? T original is equal to what? 1 plus or minus the percent is equal to P final, right? We played with the tricks last time, right? What are some words for the final P that you're calculating? Especially when it comes to money. We do it with money. The amount you pay for something, right? You paid $10 for the computer. Right? Or the other way, if you want to do it right, is final minus original over original, whichever way you prefer, right? All of them work. Okay. Ta-da, those are all the equations you essentially need to know, plus or minus a couple. Who has questions over any of these? Okay. So then we're going to apply these and review some of these concepts then. So how would a linear function show up? This one, right? So we have the slope is 0.6, and then we have 331.4. Which one would be the best interpretation of the number 331.4 in this context? Y-intercept. Add 0, right? When we set the x equal to 0, right? So figure out what your x variable is, t, right? The temperature is 0. If we want to do the slope, which one would be the best answer for slope? C, right? This one's the slope answer, right? Increase is slope per every 1 x value, right? 1 x value. This is slope. Number 13, how do we do number 13?
Look at the square root of b squared minus 4ac term.
Yep, we got to move the t over though, right?
Yeah.
We move the t over, so then it's actually negative t, right? So b squared minus 4ac all less than 0. So 16 minus a minus is plus 8t is less than 0. 8t is less than negative 16. T is negative less than negative 2. Yeah, that's the quickest way to do it. This is the non-calculator section. What's the quickest way to do number 20? The slowest way is just to solve both. And still not the quickest way. That is a way. That is not the quickest way.
2/8.
Yeah, it's 2/8. So the quickest way, y'all, is everything's proportional. If they're the same equation, they're all proportional. So it's literally 2/8 is literally going to be A over B. Right, that's the quickest way. If you want the longer way, right, you multiply the top way by 5. Right, so it's 5ax plus 5by is equal to 60, right? And then 2a plus 8y is equal to 60. And then you say, oh, okay, 5a is equal to 2, and then 5b is equal to 8. And then from here, an interesting way you can do systems if you want to is instead of adding or dividing system, adding or subtracting, you can literally just divide both sides by each other. Right, if 5a is 2 and 5b is 8, you can literally just do a over b is 2/8. I think so. I think so. But in your best interest, please simplify, right? I think they should. As long as it's numerically equivalent, there should be no reason why they mark you off. Right? Of course, they will mark you off if it says round to the nearest whole number and you don't give a whole number. Yeah. Okay. Number 14, we have our exponential form now. This one is a lovely trick question, courtesy of College Board. What's the trick here? N months, right? T years. Okay, so this gives you your percent increase, right? 1.005 is 0.5 increase. Be careful, your compounding time is the thing that makes this 1, right? What's the thing that makes this 1? It makes it 1 when t is 3. Okay, a lot of students see this and they're like, oh, it's every 1/3 of a year. It is not 1/3 of a year. It is every 3 years, because 3 is the thing that makes the exponent 1. So 3 years is equivalent to 36 months. So A is a very common wrong answer and B is a very common wrong answer. It takes 3 years to compound once. So you gotta pay attention to your units. Units are gonna be key on this test. 29. This one's another trick question. Question 29, right? It is a second to last of the multiple choice, right? Last one is number 30 for multiple choice. So
D.
D as in boy,
No, D.
D as in dog. No.
B.
B as in boy, right?
Yeah, I didn't read the constant, right?
Constant rate, right? Constant rate. But again, think about the question, right? The question is machines, right? Machines do not work exponentially. They do not decay. These are decay, right? Because your thingy is less than 1. And then again, with the last couple questions on the multiple choice, what is the most common trick? They throw a bunch of numbers at you, right? And then they expect you to be trapped by those numbers. So, oh, I see this one. So very, very likely incorrect, right? 20, like literally this number looks like it has absolutely nothing to do with that thing, right? But you needed to calculate the unit rate. So after 20 minutes is used 30% of the paper, right? So 30 times 5,000 is equal to 1,500, right? And it's 1,500 over 20 minutes. So then the unit rate is 25 papers per minute. That's where they got the 75 from. But these are all trap answers because they're literally using numbers from the question. And then so like, honestly, if you had to guess, like I would say B has like an 80% chance of being correct, right? Without even doing the math. Okay, so pay attention to constant rate. They threw in the percent because kids who are prepping for like percent. Okay, I know the percent formula. Because technically D would be the most common correct one if it were decay, right? Questions there? Constant rate is your slope. Okay, I'm reviewing this one again for those of you who need to remember how to do the box and whisker plots, right? So to review this one, if you want to plot this, you're going to go to your calculator, go to stat, right? And then you're going to edit your list, right? And then you're going to put in all the numbers on your x-axis in the first list. So 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, right? Those are all your x values. And then everything in list 2 is the quantity, right? So your quantity, you're going to have 10 for the first one, 10 for the second one, 11 for the third one, 27, 12, 10, and 5. You can do this for any version of the frequency table. Pin. All right, plug in all those numbers. Then we quit and we go stat. We go to calc. One variable statistics. List 1 for lists, list 2 for frequency. Then we calculate, right? And it gives you your 5-number summary. So your min is 15, your first quartile is 25, your median is 30, your third quartile is 35, and your x max is 45, right? You can use this to calculate the median quickly also if you need the median. List 2 would be second and then 2, right? You see the L2 above the 2, right? So second, 2. So that's how you plug that in. And then that's how you can calculate mean, median, mode really quickly, right? Because if you need the mean would be the X bar on top. So the average value of this distribution is 29.17. The N is the number of things, the median is there, right? And I guess they don't tell you the mode, but what is the mode? The most frequently occurring one is the 30, right? And from your 5-number summary, then you can figure out which one is your box and whisker plots. It's B. Topic number 2 that needs to be reviewed, right? Standard deviation. Standard deviation is defined as the average distance from the middle, right? Which one has a bigger average distance from the middle? It's data set S. The dots are further spread out. Right, so the standard deviation of data set S is greater than R. Or conversely, the standard deviation of data set R is less than the standard deviation of data set S. Yeah. Another one that tricks students is they'll do something like this. Top or bottom, which one has the greater standard deviation? Right, I heard three different things. I heard top, bottom, and same. Yeah, which one has the greater variance, the top or the bottom?
I just don't feel intimidated. I feel like I should take the ball.
It's the top. Right, the top has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 dots are away from middle, right? This one only has 5 dots away from the middle, right? There are more dots that are further away from the middle. Specifically, these ones on the edge, right? There's 6 ones that are furthest away from the middle. Here, there's only 2 that are furthest away from the middle, right? So the top has the greater standard deviation because there are more dots that are farther away from the middle, right? Standard deviation is the average distance from the middle. Questions there? Okay. Topic number 3, how do you do this by hand? Multiply by the thing, aka the conjugate, right? Okay, so you all know how to do it by the conjugate. I don't know if it'll show up on the non-calculator section. This is non-calculator because it's number 11. Let's just do it with calculator for kicks and giggles. Yeah, you can do it with the calculator. If it shows up on the calculator section, right? Still need to do it the other way. So we'll do alpha, right? Alpha F1. So we can do the fraction function, right? Alpha F1, we'll do the fraction function. So I have the fraction pulled up on my screen, right? And so the first thing I'm going to do is going to 3 minus 5i. 3 minus 5 second, okay? Second, and the button above the period is your I button, second I. 3 minus 5i on top. 8 plus 2, second I on bottom, right? That's your bottom one. And that's your answer. So you might need to make sure your calculator is in fraction mode too. So if your calculator didn't come up with that one, if you go to the thing, right, your mode, I go to my mode, right? Fraction type is n over d, and then I think I have, do I have my answers coming up as fractions? I think so. Answers auto, yeah, auto I think would be fraction. If your answers aren't coming up as fractions still, you can always go to math, which is this button, right? Math, the third one on the left side, math, and you can do frac to convert to fractions if you ever need a fraction, right? If you want to go to decimal, then you can go back and convert to decimal, right? You get that form of the I, right? And then you go back to fraction. Math. I don't know, usually for a lot of things on this calculator it does decimal, and so I use math frac a lot. That's like the most common function I use to quickly convert to fractions. Oh, to enter the fraction, do alpha, right? Alpha, and then F1, which is this y equals button, right? And the first entry that comes up is the n over d. That's the fraction function. I also use this function quite a lot when I'm doing division on the calculator section because order of operation matters, right? And if you just do parentheses or something, you might get something wrong. So I use this function to calculate complex fractions because you can insert a fraction within a fraction if you wanted to, right? So you could do a fraction on top and a fraction on bottom. So then if it says error data type, you need to go to mode, and then you need to make sure that under this one, you have real number selected, I think. I think that's, yeah. Anybody have questions in case you need it? This is more useful for ACT, honestly, because I feel like the I1s will come up on the non-calculators, my assumption. Okay, really quickly reviewing something like number 4, right? When you have to like solve for a variable that's kind of funky. Right, so to solve for f, right? All the answers are solving for f. We multiply both sides by n plus f equals f, right? Bloop, bloop. And then this is usually where kids get stuck, right? They're like, I don't know how to get f alone. To get f alone, you minus rf from both sides. From there, to make 2 into 1, you just factor out the f. If you really wanted to, you could try to plug in numbers for all of them and then see which one is true. Okay. Topic number 5, that one's completing the square, right? So let's just, to prepare you for a harder one, I'm gonna do this version. I'm just gonna multiply everything in this equation by 2. Just to teach you how to do it if everything is multiplied by 2, right? Just in case it shows up this way, okay? This is the equation we're gonna do. We're gonna isolate the x's first, and then isolate the y's second. We factor out the leading term, right? So 2 parentheses x squared plus 6x plus 2 parentheses y squared plus 5y equals negative 45 over 2. Right? We have the b term and square it, so 6 over 2 squared is 9. We have the b term here. 5 over 2 squared is gross, is 25 over 4. Then what do we add to both sides? On the right side, we're gonna add, not 9, right? We're gonna add 18 on this side. On this one, we're not gonna add 25 over 4, we're gonna add 50 over 4, right? Because it's 2 times 25 over 4, because these are being multiplied by 2. So this one is 2 parentheses x plus 3 squared. That's this number here, right? This number is the 3. This one is going to be 2 parentheses y plus 5 over 2 squared. And then this one, if you need to add it up, what is that? Negative 90 over 4 plus 50, negative 40 over 4, and then 18 times 4 is what? 72. So this is 8. Yay. The radius is not square root of 8, so now we divide by everything by 2, right? So this would be the hardest one. I've seen this happen once where you have this coefficient here, right? I've seen it happen once. So we divide everything out. So that's why I wanted to give you the harder version just in case, because most people know how to do it when it's without a coefficient. But I just want to throw in the coefficient as an extra challenge. Right, so in case you have the coefficient, you got to remember how to balance the thing, right? So this is 2 times 9, and then this is 2 times 25 over 4. Questions on this one? Completing the square if you need to. All right, what the heck is wrong with number 30? Scale and there's no days in here. Where? What? Does it start at 310? It cuts off at 310? Oh, yeah. It doesn't show a clear y-intercept is what it is, right? Because people assume that the y-intercept's 400 and it's not. What's the easiest way? You pick 2 dots that are furthest apart, right? So maybe the dot, like this is 12 comma 500, right? And then you want to do the dot, what is this? I don't know. 24 comma, what is that? 880 maybe. But another really easy way is I already know it's not going to be A and B, right? Because there's no way they're going to do that. So then literally I could just go to the answers and plug in 12, right? Plug in 12 into the answers and see which one is closer to 500, right? So 33 times 12 plus 300 is 696. So by plugging in the points, like I've avoided doing all the math. And I think students tend to forget that, right? If they give you a graph, or if they throw in the word origin, right? It becomes super easy to just do an exponential, do a quadratic, do anything, right? If they give you a table, if they give you a graph, if they give you a point. Any questions there? Do not trust your graphs, right? Towards the end, it's gonna screw with the scale, screw with the y-intercept. Okay, throwing these ones in with the margin of error, right? So margin of error is bigger for sample A, which means the sample size is smaller, right? Smaller sample size equates to larger margin of error. So sample B included the greater percentage of visitors, right? Sample B had the greater percentage because it has a smaller margin of error. This is an inverse proportion. That's why they put this one here. Similarly, for 29, they're asking you to interpret the margin of error, right? So when you have a sample, you know everything about the sample. Anything 30 and above is a good sample, right? 20 to 30 is okay if you're really random. So C doesn't work. It says any mass between this and this is a plausible value for the mean mass of the prairie dogs in the sample. We do not need to estimate the mean of the sample, right? We use sampling so that we can approximate the mean of the population. And what's the word for population here? Colony, right? And so we love these types of words in stats as well as reading, right? Plausible values, plausible answers, possible answers, predicted, right? Anything that's definitive or anything that says cause or prove, that's when we're gonna be very sus. We're also going to be sus of words like most, right? And all. Those are also very suspicious words.
Isn't 30B?
Yeah, thought so too.
Oh, number. It's number. Sorry, I didn't mean percentage. It should be number. Sorry, greater number. Thank you for catching me on that. It's not a percentage. It's a greater number. The sample is bigger. Just reviewing this one again one more time. What is this one? 4/5, right? Yeah, cosine 90 minus x is sine of 90 x and right? Okay. As you could always draw a triangle too, right? Just reviewing, so like that, right? Ad nauseum, so that you will never forget this, right? That is your shape right there. Oh, I'm done. That was fast. Okay. No, there isn't, right? So what questions do you all have on math or anything you want me to go over? Everybody feeling okay for Saturday? Has nobody's had their test sites canceled? Yeah, somebody, I don't know, somebody,
It's so sad.
I think Bay Area's had a few sites canceled. I don't know, California says anti-SAT. Yeah, sometimes the schools just aren't ready. Yeah, so hopefully,
All those people who signed up and haven't tested.
yeah, and then they can like, postpone is not bad.
You
I'm
should
not
check.
getting-
It might not be the same like school, but you should check.
You should check, because I heard a couple schools in
Wait, check
California.
Where to God.
San Clemente is okay.
And it's, if you want to check, you can go to the SAT cancel.
Oh, and my school's a testing site, and I was so mad. I came on like really like. I swear, I know that. Like, post
Check
for
her.
being a SAT. You should check. They send you a text message too.
Let's see what's canceled in California. South Tahoe, oh, that's it, huh, only 3. Well, I mean, who knows? I've had, yeah, or I've had students drive and show up and it's canceled.
I was like, trying to filter it. It's just like,
Dude, some people are going out of state.
Yeah, a lot of people are going to Las Vegas and
Yeah,
stuff,
they said they were taking
Yeah.
it in Arizona. I was like, why? And they're like,
because there's no other spots, yeah.
Denver, Colorado.
Why is Nevada not even on here? Is Nevada not a
not
state?
a real state.
Do they
Okay.
not have SAT testing in Nevada?
Well, no, they do, people are going to Vegas, so I guess they didn't cancel
That sounds
anything.
fun.
Okay.
I need a vacation.
All right, so for tomorrow, right, your goal is not to like try to do any sections or anything. That's kind of a waste of time. If you want to review any mistakes or make yourself a little cheat sheet of things you need to remember, that's a great idea. So when you're in the test center, right, you're going to literally be sitting there for 30 minutes to an hour, depending on how quickly they go. So instead of like sitting there twiddling your thumbs, I don't know if it helps you to have like a little like 1-page cheat sheet to, these are the things I need to remember.
Are you on?
You can bring them.
Yeah, you have to put it away when the test starts.
You can't access it.
Yeah, you can't access it, but if you need like the last things that you forget, right? If there's certain equations that some people are just bad at memorizing certain equations. Yeah.
Some of the test sites won't let you bring anything in other than
Yeah.
calc-
Sometimes the proctors are really hard about it, but like the proctors that I've seen, generally speaking, like there's nothing that says you can't be like reading a book or something before the test starts. It's once the test starts, you have to put everything away. So if you still want to write the cheat sheet, writing the cheat sheet is actually useful anyways, right? So if you have to not have it, that's fine too. Or meditate, whatever you wish to do, right? Okay. Right, so anybody who started late who wants to stick around can stick around, but everybody who started at 4, you're free to go.